and I am interviewing my mom on events in Chicago's past and future. How are you doing today?
Fine.
Where were you born?
I was born in Chicago.
Did you always live in Chicago?
No, when I was 2, we moved to a farm in Iowa, in Bluffton, Iowa. And my father was a farmer for many years, and he was also a teacher. And then we moved back to Chicago.
So how old were you when you finally settled in Chicago?
I was 14 when we moved back.
What did you think of Chicago when you came here?
Oh, I thought I loved it because it was such a nice big city, and I was from the farm. Then the only life I knew was living on the farm. Our neighbors were 3 miles away from us, and I just loved the city, that everything was so close, and people didn't know all your business, because out in the farm we were all a lot of relatives and things, and everybody knew everybody's business, and we had a party line on our telephone, and you couldn't even get a phone call without 3 or 4 people picking up and knowing everything that you talked about things. So I loved it to move back to Chicago because it was it was just, everything was here. There was nice downtown. You could go to movies and do things, whereas on the farm there was nothing to do. And in fact, if my parents wouldn't have moved back when I was 14, I would have moved back when I was 18 and out of high school to get a job and things, because my brothers and sisters had all moved back earlier, and they were all living here in Chicago at that time. So we just moved back here really to be with them. And my father's health was failing, so that's why he couldn't keep doing the farm work anymore.
Did it take a lot to adjust after coming from a small town to a big city?
No, because I loved it. I just wanted to be here. That's all. I just liked it so much on the farm that it didn't take me long to adjust to the big city.
Did you find the people friendly, happy, mean, or plain?
Most of them were very friendly. We moved right to Bridgeport, and Bridgeport is like a small community anyway, and people were pretty friendly to us, although my mother would always warn me about not walking down the street, because she said people were out there ready to grab me and put me in one of those houses for girls. But I didn't believe her too much, but she threatened me with that a lot, because she used to work every day, and she was afraid somebody was going to take me off the street when I walked back and forth to school. So she was more afraid of the city, I think, than I was.
Did you experience any crime or extreme poverty in your area?
No.
Do you remember any huge labor events in Chicago's past?
Oh, yes. My brother worked for General Motors, and there was a strike in 1969, and I can remember it because I was working at Spiegel's at the time, and my brother was on layoff, and he needed money. So I asked him, I told him I could get him a job at Spiegel's, working there until he got his job back at General Motors. So I got him a job, and he worked there for about 3 or 4 weeks, but he couldn't take it. The job was very hard, and it was lifting boxes and things like that. So he had to quit the job because he just couldn't take it. And I'll tell you, they were paying a lot less money than at General Motors at Spiegel's. So it goes to show you that even people that make big money sometimes don't work as hard as people who make minimum wage, because that was about a minimum wage job that I got him.
Are there any crime events that you remember hearing about in Chicago's past?
Oh, my mother used to talk about the 1893 World's Fair, and in that time there was mostly what she used to talk about was this mass murderer that was supposed to have been there, and that this was a part of the Columbian Exposition. The guy who was supposed to have like a store or something up there, and his house, and he used to lure women into his house, and they said he could have killed a lot of women, like 100 women or something. They don't really know how many, because he had this huge vat of lye in his basement, and he used to kill them, and they put them in this lye, and their whole bodies used to disintegrate. And he used to take their hair and stuff his pillows with their hair, and they didn't catch him for a long time because people just used to keep disappearing. And finally, they did catch him, and they found this big thing of lye in his basement. But he never confessed to how many women he did kill, but it was a very large amount of women.
Was he put in jail for life?
I don't know. She never did say what happened to him, so I don't know. I guess he was crazy, but I suppose they put him in jail. She never said what happened to him.
Are there any other crime events that you remember?
Well, and I don't remember this, but of course it was that Valentine's Day massacre in 1929, and I mean that's been played up so much on the TV and in the movies and stuff. Most people know about that. It was supposed to have been when Al Capone engineered the shooting of a rival gang when he was down in Florida. They never were able to pin it on Al Capone, but they assumed that he was the one who ordered it done. And then there was the Black Panthers of the 60s. I do remember that. That was when the 60s were a very turbulent period in my life. And the Black Panthers were, of course, a militant organization. And they were just like sleeping in their beds one night. And the way I heard it is the police just started shooting them. Shooting through the doors and stuff. And they had guns too, of course. They were armed to the teeth, and they shot back, and a lot of people were dead. And it was an embarrassment to the Chicago Police Department, though, because it was proved that they did shoot first. And then, of course, there's the Gacy killings. He killed all those young boys, and just recently they executed him for that. That was more recent. It was on the north side. My husband used to live close to where John Gacy was, had his house too, but that's, the Gacy thing has been covered pretty much too, so I think everybody pretty much knows about that.
Were there any famous disasters that you recall hearing about in Chicago when you lived in Iowa?
Yes, when I was a little girl in Iowa, I remember coming home from school one day, and then my mother had the radio on, and they were talking about the Our Lady of Angels fire, and she was very upset about it because of all the little kids that got killed and stuff in there. So I did hear about that, but like I said, I was quite young at the time, and it didn't really register with me. But that was a disaster that we heard about all the way out in Iowa, and that's 400 miles from Chicago. Recently, of course, there was those 19 children that was found in that house that was, that was all filled with rats and roaches and things like that. And I thought that was a terrible thing, but that's pretty well been covered too, so I think you know pretty much about that.
What significant things did Richard J. Daley do to better Chicago?
Well, my mom used to tell me the main thing that Richard Daley did to help Chicago was get rid of the rats. She was telling me when I was a small baby, because like I was telling you earlier, when I moved out to Iowa when I was 2, when I was a small baby, that they used to have to put my cradle and hang it from the ceiling so that the rats couldn't get my cradle at night while I was sleeping, because rats were attracted to milk on babies and things like that. And in fact, the rats were so bad that they would get into people's beds and things. I mean, they were really, really bad. That was one of the reasons my mom really wanted to move out of Chicago. She was scared to death of rats, and so am I, but they were awfully bad. I mean, they would run right in front of you on the street and in the alleys. They were everywhere. And like I said, the worst part of it was they were actually in your house, and it was hard to get rid of them. But Mayor Daley started the program where he put all the trash in containers, because before that, I guess it was just heaped in the alleys, and nobody even bothered to put it in containers. That's how come they got so bad. He put it in containers, and then he put poison out in all the alleys, and it helped a great deal, and all most of the rats were killed or not. Well, it kept them down anyway. I mean, they're I've seen them today. Today they're getting kind of bad again too with the recent thing we heard about the restaurants downtown. The rats are getting bad again. Sounds like, but my mom said they're not near as bad as they were when I was a baby. She said it was just terrible. I mean, in broad daylight, they'd be just walking everywhere, and you'd be afraid almost, because if you were by yourself and they were hungry, a bunch of them could attack a person and actually kill them. The rats are vicious when they're hungry, and they get really big. So that was one of the things. It might be a little odd thing about Mayor Daley, but that's what my mom said she thought was his best accomplishment.
Did Chicago change dramatically after he died?
Well, when he died and Mayor Byrne was there, it was like, everything was. Mayor Daley was just like, to me anyway, he was like everything. He was always mayor from the time I can remember, and then when he died, it was just like chaos, because it was like losing a top member of a government, of a communist government almost, because he had everything. He had all the power. He could do anything he wanted, and when he died, it just like everything fell apart. I mean, it was just like almost chaos in the city. Not not anything where people would get killed or anything, but it was just like, what would we do? Because he was the only mayor we've had for years and years, and he had control of the Democratic Party as well as being mayor. So he had, like I said, he had supreme control over everything. And anytime you wanted a favor or anything like that, you just go to the office up here in the 11th Ward, because we are in Bridgeport, and we were able to get almost anything we wanted, within reason. It was, my brother passed away, and he had a 2-flat where my mother and father and myself lived. And then I got married, and I moved to the first floor apartment, and that 2-flat was put into a trust fund, or it had to be sold, because my brother had 2 children, and they told us it would take 7 to 9 years for us to gain control of the property, because that's how long it would take to go through court. It had to go through court in order to be sold. And the building was in need of repair. I mean, the roof was bad and the plumbing was bad. And if we had to wait 7 to 9 years before we could start repairs on it, the building wouldn't have been ready. We would have had to move out, and it would have been just an abandoned building. So we explained all this when we went to the 11th Ward office and asked them if there's any way they could speed the process up, because we really wanted to buy the thing and get to fixing it up so we could live in it, because it was in bad shape. So they listened to us very nicely, and within 6 months that building was in the courts, and we were able to purchase it. So that was a nice thing that kind of disappeared after Mayor Daley died. Now you don't. I don't think you can even ask for a favor. I don't know, but it kind of, the whole organization kind of went downhill after that.
Did Jane Byrne do any significant things to better Chicago?
Well, Jane Byrne was elected because of the snowstorm, and I voted for her myself, because Belandic, when he took over, he just seemed, he was an educated man, but he seemed not to care about the people, and it probably was a false assumption. But I know when I was working at the time, and I'm standing out in those corners waiting for the bus in really cold weather with the snow falling all over me, and trudging through drifts and drifts, and the buses weren't coming and the trains weren't coming. I got stranded downtown a few times at night, didn't get home till 11:30 at night, had to be to work the next day at 8 o'clock in the morning, had to get up at 5 in the morning trying to get a bus to go downtown. And Belantic would just say, well, there was no snow problem on his block. And it was just ridiculous. You couldn't get anywhere in the city. So Jane Byrne seemed to sympathize more with the people about the problem, because it was a terrible problem. And and being a woman and stuff, and that's why I voted for her, and so did my parents, or my mother did anyway. I don't know about my father.
What was it like during the Democratic Convention of 1968?
Oh, it was pure chaos in here as usual. I loved it though because I was really young, and when you're young, you like all kinds of excitement, and I liked it because of the excitement. That went along with Mayor Daley on that because I think that the people, a lot of the agitators, were from out of town. They came down to Grant Park just to cause problems. I mean, they told the people here that I heard it through the newscast that they were going to burn down buildings, or they were going to burn down State Street and let Chicago burn and things like that. And I agree with Mayor Daley what he did with the policemen and things like that. I mean, I know they did get carried away with it, but those people were here only to cause problems and stuff. And if they wanted to protest, they didn't have to do it in such a violent way, and just to cause trouble and to make the world look at Chicago that the way it did, that Chicago was so bad and things like that. So I didn't participate in anything like that, but I did try to go and see at the amphitheater, the convention, see the people and things like that up there, because we only lived about 15 blocks from there, so I'd walk up as far as I could go, but they had it all cordoned off, and you couldn't get real close to the convention unless you had an ID of a press or a politician or something like that. So I used to go up and watch the fancy cars and things like that going through, but I couldn't get real close like I wanted to because they kind of had police everywhere to keep you out of there. They were afraid of the agitators from downtown coming up to the convention, but they never did get up that far. They stayed basically down in Grant Park.
Are there any recent events that are considered as important as the 1968 convention?
Oh well, yes. The recent, I mean, I guess you would say that the defeat of Dan Rostenkowski by a relatively unknown person. What was his name again? I don't remember. Do you remember? Flanagan. I think that's his name. Michael Flanagan, I think. Yeah, he won, and it was a kind of a shock to almost everybody because Rostenkowski won the Democratic convention or election, and usually after you win that in Chicago, you're automatically going to be the candidate. But I guess his political problems and his his indictments and things came back to haunt him, and I don't really. I mean, they've said that he didn't even really campaign, so I think the man just wanted to really basically be out of office. I think he just lost interest in going back to Washington because of his problems with the courts and things like that. I think if he would have campaigned more, he still probably would have won.
And who were the Conspiracy 7?
Oh, that was in the Chicago, when we had the convention. They were arrested for conspiring to burn Chicago down and things like that. And it's funny though, since then they were brought in handcuffs and things like that and made a big show of themselves. But since then they've all become successful businessmen and things like that. And they actually are turned into the people that they were protesting against. In that time, those people were the only ones who could really protest like that were people that had money, because people that came from poor families, as I did, you couldn't afford to protest. You didn't have the money. I mean, the college students were the ones that were doing it, and they all had parental support, things like that, and they had no idea what it's like to live without money. And these people, I mean, they're all with the flower children and all that. And then most of these people come from wealthy families because, when you're poor and you have to work for everything you get, these people seem just so weird to you because they're like in another world. I mean, everything they stood for was nice and everything, but it's just unreal. You have to work for what you get, and you just can't drug out and forget about things. Life is not like that. you have to work hard for what you get, and they kind of didn't know that, and I think it's, like I said, it's kind of ironic that they turned into the people that they did today. Now they're politicians and businessmen and things that they said when they were young they would never turn into. But for the security and things, they realize now that that's the way they wanted to live. That when they were younger, they were just protesting and want to bring the government down. And it's odd how your ideas change with the times.
When you lived in Chicago as a teenager, did you experience any kind of racism?
Well, when I was 15, I don't know if it was racism or not. I didn't have too much experience with black people. When I was in Iowa, there were no black people out in the area I was in. And I wasn't prejudiced. I don't think I am prejudiced today, but I went to one of these community people, because my family was low income. My mom and dad didn't make very much money. And I wanted a job really bad because I wanted clothes and things which my parents couldn't afford to buy me. So I asked him if there was any jobs available in the neighborhood or anything. And he couldn't give me anything in the neighborhood, but he gave me directions to go for this job that was sponsored by the city. It was in a city park. And since I was new to Chicago, I had no idea really where it was. He explained to me how to take the different buses to get there. And so I did. I really wanted to work. I took the buses and I got there. And I realized when I got there I was in an all-black neighborhood. And I had to walk through this really long park. And like I said, I'm not prejudiced, but I was kind of scared because I was the only white girl in this huge park, and I was, young, and I was just scared. And the policeman was there, and he seen me walking, and he kind of walked with me because he knew. I guess I looked scared too because, it was just an odd experience. I never even looked at people's color before, but then all of a sudden, when you're in an area where everybody's black and you're the only white person, you kind of affects you. And I suppose it would affect a black person the same way if he was in a neighborhood where there's only white people. Because before that, I never even thought about a color or anything. And I walked and I went and past this swimming pool, and this young black person yelled out to me. He says, "Well, I'm just as white as you are, but I've been out in the sun too long." So, by this time there was like two other people walking with me, two other ladies and the policeman, and they said, "Well, now you can see that we're really not that bad of people and stuff." And I didn't think they were that bad of people, but I don't think they realized that I had just come from a farm, and this was like you said, it was a completely different element for me. So I went into the place to fill out an application. And when I went in there, they said, "Oh, well, they were sorry, but that day was, the park was open, but the person that was to talk to me, it was a holiday for them, and to come back another day, or come back the next day." And I was just so scared. I just couldn't come back there. When I went out, I ended up taking the wrong bus, and I went in the wrong direction. I didn't know where I was, and I was just, my nerves were just shot. And I finally got on the right bus, and I was standing up because it was crowded. And my mom, I didn't see her. She was on that bus coming home from work, and she tapped me on the shoulder, and I just jumped and I just screamed. I don't know what I thought, somebody was going to get me or what, but I don't know. I was just really scared. So I never did go back for that job. So I didn't work that summer. I went to work the next summer for a person that my mom got me a job for, but I didn't get that one anyways.
What was it like during 1966 when Martin Luther King led the open housing marches?
Well, like I said, I was young then too, and anything like that was a big excitement for me to go to, and that was in Marquette Park, which wasn't too far from Bridgeport. So me and my cousin, we decided to go up there and see what was going on. So we did. We took the bus up there, and we just were standing around. We seen Martin Luther King coming with all the other people marching and things, and the white people on the sidelines were very nasty and stuff to them. It was an all-white neighborhood, of course, and they were marching through there, and they didn't feel they had any right to do it. I didn't participate in it one way or the other, for or against, because basically I didn't have any feelings about it one way or the other, if they should move there or if they shouldn't. I knew they should be able to march anywhere they wanted to, but in my mind, though, it was kind of like instigating people, because the people were afraid. They were afraid of losing their houses and things like that. So I think Martin Luther King, by doing that, just raised people's fears. But it probably had to be done. I don't know. But like I said, I just kind of watched. I didn't really participate one way or the other in it.
Is there any racism experienced when Harold Washington was running for mayor?
Oh yes, that was a lot of racism in that. I remember them giving around. We had at that time we had a two-flat, and we lived next door. We had a new house, and they basically were saying if Harold Washington was elected mayor, I mean your property value was going to go down to zero, and the hordes of people in gangs were going to be moving into the neighborhood, and it was going to be just an awful place to live. You would have to get out of the city and lose your home. And they had people scared to death in Bridgeport that if Harold Washington took over, that our life as we knew it was going to end. And it turned out that this wasn't true, that actually Harold Washington, after he was elected, did far more for Bridgeport than Mayor Byrne ever did. So I would vote for a black person in a minute now to be mayor, because I know that isn't true, but I think it's terrible that people can stir up that much. I don't think it's hate, but they can work to people's emotions, economic emotions, really, because like I said, if we would have lost our house and our house went to half value or something like that, that's economic. I mean, that hurts you where you live. I mean, that's like your whole thing you work for years is gone from you. And people shouldn't be able to exploit that fear in you like they do. But at that time, it was really high. I mean, the whole everybody, that's all they talked about. Well, they're afraid they're going to lose their homes, and they're afraid they're going to be overrun by people that they didn't know or understand. And it was just awful, that the type of fear that they put into you. But it wasn't. It turned out everything was fine after he was elected. I would have voted for the man in a minute if he would have lived to be reelected, because I thought he was doing a great job.
After Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968, were there any riots in Chicago?
Yes, there was what they called the West Side riots. People were, they felt terrible that Martin Luther King had been shot. I felt bad that the man had been shot as well, but it seemed to me, as in the riot in California, that they had those big riots. It seemed to me the same thing, that the people were starting out with, they were, upset about that, but then they started looting the stores. They started taking out television sets, and they had TV cameras on there where you could actually see the people walking the streets with as much stuff as they could carry, the clothes, the televisions, even refrigerators and things. Are walking down the street. I mean, people would just with dollies with new refrigerators and stoves and just everything, just looting the stores. And that wasn't protesting somebody's death. That was being a thief. And they burnt a lot of the West Side as well. So it got so bad that Mayor Daley, of course, he was noted for that around the world, that we shouldn't have said it, but he finally came on there and he said that if he saw any more looters, he gave the order that they were to shoot to kill. And then the looting stopped. It stopped right away when he said that, because he meant it. I mean, people say now, well, and later he even said, well, he didn't really mean it. But yeah, when he said it, he meant it, because he looked like he meant it. He come on there and he was really upset and mad, and you can't. He had to do something to quit it, because it was bad. I mean, people were. Before he gave that order, the police were just standing around watching them take everything out of the stores and burning things and stuff. They weren't they had no control. So to get the control back, he did use that order, and I supported it. But a lot of people that weren't from Chicago didn't support it.
And did he make any other changes after the assassination to stop this rioting?
Well, it kind of just disappeared on its own. Mayor Daley was not one that was really too great in race relations. I don't think. I don't think the man was prejudiced. I think it was the way he was brought up. He did. During his terms, they had those housing projects, and at the time, I think they all were in good intention. Those high rises were good. I think they had that in their mind, and they were helping these people because they were nice. I mean, they were clean and nice when they first were built, but they didn't have any idea what it would turn into. Now the places are like prisons for the people, and the scattered site housing has been determined as much better for the poor black people. And but at the time that they were built, I think they were done with good intentions.
Were there any other signs of rioting in the past?
And that's all I can remember. There were those particular things.
How are Mayor M. Daley's methods different from Mayor J. Daley's?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just old or whatever, but I don't know. I don't like Mayor Richard M. Daley as much as the older. I think the older Daley had. I don't know. He had something about him that I really liked, and the younger one just doesn't seem to have that. I think he's doing an okay job with the city, and he keeps the budget balanced and things like that, but he just doesn't have the charisma his father did, that's all.
Were there any curfews set in Chicago when you were young?
Yes, there was curfews set, of course, during the '67 riot, and whenever there was a riot, they set a curfew of anybody under 21 had to be in the house by 10 o'clock at night. And of course, me being young and crazy, I used to specifically go out when I used to issue those things because it was something exciting. I didn't go in the areas where it was rioting or anything like that, but I would just go out, and my mother would tell me that if I got arrested, she wouldn't come and pick me up because I wasn't supposed to be out there anyway, but I had to go out and at least try and be a part of what was going on.
How did people view Chicago because of the events that have happened in the past?
Oh, well, when I was first married, we went to Ireland for a vacation, and whenever we would tell anybody from Ireland that we were from Chicago, they would think it was still like in the 20s with the Tommy guns and things like that. And they thought Mayor Daley was terrible. They had a picture, and I seen it when we were over there on their TV, where they were showing a picture of him leading the St. Patrick's Day parade. And, they thought he was a dictator, and how could we live in a city like that? They practically thought we were walled in and couldn't get out like the people in Berlin were. I mean, it was really quite funny how the perception of the people in Ireland was of Mayor Daley. It was like he was just a terrible person, and I suppose that was probably his perception in most places because it was there. But actually living here in Chicago, we thought he was pretty nice.
How do these events make Chicago seem as a whole? Like, what characteristics of Chicago would you say it had? Certain characteristics of Chicago.
I don't know what you mean.
Like, would you say it's a nice town, or like, certain adjectives to describe Chicago?
Well, nice. I think Chicago is a good place to live. It's and especially now here in Bridgeport, Chinatown has expanded, and they're building a lot of new buildings here in Bridgeport. I think it's raised the level of the housing. They've knocked down a lot of the abandoned buildings, and every place you look, and it has a spare lot. They're building new homes and things like that. So I think Bridgeport area is a nice place to live now.
How has Chicago changed since you first came here at 14?
Well, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. I mean, the '60s were crazy times, just crazy times. But Chicago as a whole, I don't think it's really changed that much. And maybe it's just because I'm kind of myopic on it. I just don't, and I don't really pay attention to it that much and see where it's changed. But so after Mayor Day, the original Mayor Daley died, and all that Mayor Byrne and all that chaos died down. Now that his son has taken over, I think it seems like the politics anyway is a lot more peaceful.
Do you notice any changes, like if you go to a different neighborhood such as Canaryville? Do you think it's any different than your neighborhood?
Well, Canaryville is much more like the small town that I used to live in. It seems like everybody knows everybody else much more than in Bridgeport. Bridgeport's a little bit more kind of. Bridgeport still has its people that know people and stuff, but when you go to Canaryville, it's like the people will say, "Well, what's your name?" and then they'll know your name. I mean, if you've ever lived up there, they'll know your name and they'll know your family. And they'll know who you are, and if you say, well, this other person's name, and they'll, if the person has lived within, say, even 10 blocks of them, it seems like they know who that person is, and they know what they're like, they know if they're good or they're bad or what. So it's like much more like a small, intimate little community still in Canaryville. The people seem like they're closer or something up there, and they have larger families too. Canaryville is not uncommon for someone to have 10 or 12 kids.
What would you say the major ethnic background is in Bridgeport?
In Bridgeport, it used to be Polish, and Irish and Lithuanian, with a few Spanish. Now it's a lot of Spanish. There's still some Polish and some Irish. It's a few German. But there's a large percentage now of Chinese that have moved in from Chinatown, and they're practically, gradually really taking over the neighborhood. Or, they whenever they can, they move in. Bridgeport has always been a family type neighborhood where the house usually goes to the child and it goes on and on from there. But as the children leave the neighborhood, sometimes they sell that house and they'll probably sell it to somebody that's Chinese, and of course a lot of the new buildings that are going up have all got Chinese people that have been buying them, and so the Chinese are a great influence right now in Bridgeport.
Do you notice that do certain ethnic backgrounds such as Polish and Irish, do you think they are separate in the neighborhood? They're live in their separate parts of the neighborhood, or are they all mixed, do you think?
Oh, they used to be very separated. I remember when I first came in here at 14, I lived on 32nd Street, and I went to St. Mary of Perpetual Help High School. And when I went there, they told my father, well, that this is a Polish community. I mean, your daughter is welcome to go to high school here because even if she's Irish or whatever, it didn't matter that I was Irish. But they made it clear to my father that it was a Polish community and that we should register at St. David's, which is on 32nd and Emerald, which is about like 6 blocks away, because that was the Irish church. And so at that time it was very segregated that way. But now I don't think it is, because now there's a lot more Mexican people in the neighborhood, and there's less Polish and less Irish, and it seems like that's kind of gone. But it may still be a little bit here, because now that I'm older, I don't run into that resistance anymore. But I remember when we first moved in here, it was very much segregated into communities. And I knew that I was in a Polish and Lithuanian community. I was the only Irish person around for blocks. It was kind of, there was a couple more Irish girls that went to St. Mary's, but mostly it was Polish and Lithuanian.
Do you believe that with all these ethnic backgrounds that they all work together to better Chicago?
Oh, I think so. I think that that's one difference, as you were trying to get me to say earlier, that I think the people are more now integrated into each other more than when I first arrived here. Even that, like I said, now there's the Chinese and the Mexicans, and everybody just goes wherever they want to. Whereas before, it was if you got out of your own little community, people were wondering, well, who were you and where are you from and stuff like that, and why are you there? And I don't think they do that anymore, much less than they used to do.
Well, it's really nice talking to you. It's very educational. I learned a lot.
Well, it was certainly nice talking to you, too.
Okay. This has been Miranda Catherine interviewing my mom on Chicago's events. This is for Mr. Lillig's Chicago in Literature class. Thank you for listening.